Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. Peonies. At this time of year, it's sort of the beginning of the peony blooming season. They do come at different stages. In other words, there's early, mid-season, and late. The herbaceous peonies, the ones that actually die down to the ground, are great in a garden. Very often they're long-lasting, they're very hardy, and you'll find that they basically will replace a small shrub in a mixed border. Now, they'll give you blooming time. They'll have ants crawling all over them. Ignore it until you have to go and cut them for an arrangement. Then somehow or other you got to get all the ants out. I've yet to find a perfect answer to that one, though shaking them upside down does seem to help a little bit if you're gentle. The peonies come in various colors. There have been a great deal of breeding done. You must remember that, of course, the peony, particularly the herbaceous ones, have been around for literally millennia. So, we've got doubles, singles, anemone styles. That's the shape of the flowers. But most of the outer petals are actually sepals. And sepals are basically a modified part of the flower to become or look like a petal. Many of them are extremely fragrant, and you really want the fragrant ones. So even if you don't cut them for the home, they do make a beautiful scent in the garden, particularly in early evening. The scent is generally sweet and slightly overpowering, so you may not have to get too close in some cases. Some are, of course, stronger than others. Now, most of the herbaceous peonies are about 3 feet tall. They spread across by a rhizome, and they last a long time in the garden before they have to be moved, etc. Very often you will see a deserted old farmhouse where the basement is basically there, or there is just the remnants of a house, and yet in the garden still the peonies bloom. So you have to understand that that is very, very common, particularly here in Ontario. The bloom lasts for up to 6 weeks, and you do get to pick early, mid-season, and late-blooming cultivars. The culture is that of full sun or even light shade. Now, I will say this, you are better in full sun than light shade. The time when you move them into light shade is when you're dealing with some of the pastel colors. These will actually do better in lighter shade. They require a well-drained site with a deep, fertile soil. Very often, even a clay soil that has been modified heavily will work very well. In too much shade, the flowering is inhibited, and the competition from other tree roots or a late spring freeze can sometimes adversely affect this plant. They go into a mixed border. They can be used for cut flowers. They really are an asset both for their flowers and their foliage, particularly the reddish tint on some of the younger shoots in the spring, deep green in the summer, and often some of them will actually have a fall leaf color on the maroons and burgundies. It seems that's the ones I seem to always get. It takes often 5 to 7 years to produce a flowering plant from seed, so many people do the division. So make sure that you do propagate them. You're going to do it in late summer. Somewhere around August the 15th is what I've always found to be the best time. I don't know why, but it always works well for me. You want to cut the peony rhizomes into segments with 3 to 5 eyes. Eyes are where the new growth or leaves and stems come up from the ground. They should be set no more than 1 to 2 inches below the ground, and that means that the rhizomes are just that, and they're put into a pot or into the ground horizontally. If you basically plant them way too deep, very often the peony will come up, it will grow, it will multiply, but very often it will never bloom, or it seems like it'll take forever to bloom, and we are talking about many, many, many years. So if you can plant them 1 inch down, that's even better. It takes up to 3 years to get them into an established garden situation. So once you've planted them, you want to go and put them into a situation where they will be not moved for at least 3 to 5 years. So give them a little bit of leg room and you will be fine. Now, there are a few diseases that herbaceous peonies get, mainly botrytis, and that's where the flowers actually never open. Okay, this blight is common, but good sanitation will help. These buds that never open, they're the flower buds, are removed and gone to the street. You never compost peony leaves or their flowers because of disease. Mildew is a problem with some varieties in the light shady areas, so that's always a concern. As to hardiness, zone 3. So we are talking one of the hardiest plants you could probably plant in your garden and still get great color and bloom. Try and pick early, mid-season, and late peonies that are famous for standing up without too much of support from a peony ring. Otherwise, yes, use the peony rings. They're not that expensive, and they do keep them up and fairly tight so that they look much nicer as a plant, as well as when they're in bloom. So that's always a good idea. Now, once you've got them in the ground, they do like moisture. So please make sure that the peonies do actually get adequate soil moisture, not foliage moisture. The moisture on flower buds and on leaves does encourage disease. So you don't want to do that either. So remember a few of the rules. Plant shallow. Feed very poorly or very lightly. They're not heavy feeders. And put them where you know you're not going to have to move them for many, many, many years. There is one related species that I think you should not try, and that is the Peony tenuifolia and its varieties. Now, this is the fern-leaf peony. People kill this one left, right, and center. It's very expensive. It's very hard to grow. It is known commonly as the fern-leaf peony. There are single flowers and there are doubles. Both have the same care. Both need good soil, reasonable light, and moist. And, of course, shallow. You cannot overwater these. They will not like it. They are susceptible to some of the diseases as well. And the double is the one that I grow. And, of course, the singles and the doubles are both a very dark, almost scarlet red. Again, their hardiness as well is zone 3. So make sure that you go and actually plant these carefully, selectively. Don't depend on them, because I've had more people kill this particular group of peonies than have actually been successful. Some of the growers just won't grow them anymore simply because of that. In fact, the ones that I do have in my garden are actually rescue plants that I rescued right out of the nursery at an exorbitant price. The garden center's literally killing them. Now, there is also known as tree peonies. Now, these are peonies that have woody stems that don't die to the ground. They do get different heights, but most of them are about 4 to 5 feet. They are woody. They come in red, rose pink, white, and some yellow ranges as well. So what you've got is a tree peonies that will get 3 to 5 feet tall and a good 3 to 4 feet across. They do bloom in mid-spring, and that depends a lot on variety. When you saw the peonies in the old Japanese and Chinese paintings, this is what they were painting. They have been around for a long time. They have been known to be grafted on herbaceous peonies when they're first growing and young, and you plant them in your garden. Eventually, they get settled into your garden, and the herbaceous root actually deteriorates to nothing, and the woody plant roots take over. This can take many years, but it is the way things are done in the tree peony world. There are things that they do get: leaf blight, they do get stem wilt, they do get scale, but the most common one is the stem wilt, which is caused by cankers that girdle the stem. There's no control except for digging and replacing and getting rid of. It's a terrible thing to say. They're only hardy to zone 4. They have been around, let's say, in southern China for 1800 years. So, yes, in the old paintings, these are the varieties that you go and actually see. There has been a lot of breeding done with these. You'll get some great doubles, semi-doubles, even the golden ones with crinkly petals. You'll get a lot of the whites with purple flares, mauve pinks, which are very common, and it's probably some of my favorite. Single flowers, as well as the creamy mauve and light yellow, in a form almost like a rose bush, but it is not as vigorous. It's close, but not as much. You'll like the pinks. I would recommend that you start with the pinks, because the pinks are the ones that seem to predominate and be the strongest. There are coral pinks, there's rose pinks, there's ones with pink and bronze. There is a lot, okay, that you can actually do with tree peonies. Put them into the mixed border. If they're pale, okay, in other words, pale colors, you do want to give them a little bit of shade from mid-afternoon sun, but they do enjoy the sun, the moisture, and a decent, rich, well-drained soil. If you would like a book for referencing for peonies, there are a lot of them out there. The last one that I found that was extremely good was Peonies by Alan Rogers. Now, it is from Timber Press, and it's got great pictures, it's got all the care, etc., etc., and it gives you the most recommended varieties and whether they're fragrant or not. So if you want a book to at least get an idea of what you're looking at truly, the recommended species and variety list here is excellent in this book. And they're not brand new varieties that you haven't been tried and true. They are tried and true. So that's Peonies by Alan Rogers from Timber Press. I believe it was last published or printed in 2004. So you may have to go looking for it, but ask. Okay? I'm Bruce Zimmerman. This is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.